over from the beginning of where your grandparents.
Well, my grandmother was 19 years old. My grandfather was 20 years old. It's when they.
And he was the Armstrong.
He was what?
An Armstrong?
He was the Armstrong, yes.
And what was her maiden name?
Graham.
Graham.
Graham. No! How did I come to say Grange? Those were cousins of hers, wasn't it? No, Campbell.
Oh, she was the Campbell.
She was the
That's
Campbell.
Why
You see, my father married a Campbell, and my grandfather had married a Campbell. My father married a Campbell, but no relation.
Oh, yeah.
You see, that's what it is. You see, but isn't that funny?
So
I met these Campbells.
Isn't that funny?
Yes, yes.
Anyway, she was from a wealthy family.
Well, her father was had the shipbuilding, like same as the Ford car company. You know me. He was well fixed.
Yeah.
Financially well fixed.
I think I've even heard of Campbell shipyards in that book about the Irish. Trinity. Yeah. Anyway. This was in Belfast, right?
This was in Belfast, and they had an estate, and I can remember her telling me, and the name of the estate was Tilly Own House. And so anyway, he was the head gardener, and she says, all of us, the they had three sisters, and they were close together, and they would take walks they weren't allowed out of the place hardly, but they would take walks in the gardens and so on. And so she got talking to this gardener. She says he was quite a nice man. She said, this way, she said to me, she says he seemed quite a nice man, but she says my father, she never used the word dad, my father, came along one day and he said, no more of that. She says, you're not to talk to any of the employees. That's finished. She says, I think that did it. She says, we met secretly from then on. Well, and then arranged to be married, and grandfather was arranging to come out to Canada. And so that's what, so she slid away from home. She says, I had an awful job, but she had this 600, as I thought, $600, but the way we think it might be pounds.
Might have been the equivalent of $600.
Maybe that's what it was.
That was a lot of money. $600 was a lot of
money in those days.
Yeah,
well, I think it was equivalent.
They were worth about $5 a pound. Yeah, that would have been a lot of money.
Well, anyway, so she was. So they were married right away. They went into hiding because they were married, and they went into this hiding. And he was working on this boat so as to make his way over to Canada. You see, already it took a long time to get this boat ready for
all loaded
animals and everything on it.
Yeah.
So anyway.
But the boat was late leaving, wasn't it?
Well, and it was 2 weeks behind for leaving. She says, I nearly gave up. She says she nearly gave up in this hiding. But she says it was terrible. She had a lady's maid. And
oh, yes. I mean,
she was waited on. She says, I hadn't lifted a spoon to cook a thing. She says, and when she came out here to this place that I've just mentioned, she had to take on the cooking. Well, she said, did I ever get into mix up so many times with this? Yeah.
They took 3 weeks for the passage across?
I think she said 3 weeks, or near 3 weeks.
And it must have been rough, because you said she was sick.
It was rough, and she was sick every day. There was she wasn't thank goodness, she says, Grandpa, he didn't take sick because he had to look after these cattle and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, they landed in, well, I don't know just where they landed, but they landed near Hull, Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
Because that, well, they went to Hull, Quebec from the boat, wherever they landed, and that was where his brother was, Andrew Armstrong, which is Cousin Mary's father. And you know, I asked Cousin Mary about that, about her. She could not tell me a thing. I could tell her something, and she couldn't tell me a thing.
Right.
I mean, I could tell her that my grandfather had come out to it. She couldn't tell me a thing.
But it was from things that you remembered your grandmother telling you.
Yeah,
but
you did meet this grandfather, though, did you?
Oh, grandfather.
That's the one that you went to the 50th wedding.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Yes, I lived with them for a while, and that. I knew them well. Anyway, I can remember when Grandmother was telling me all this. Their bedroom, I remember it was a step up. The house had been added to, I think, and it was a step up into their bedroom from the dining room. Great big rooms. The dining room was this size. And there was this dining room table in the center of it. And she was sitting there mending. It had been wash day. She was sitting there mending, and she told me that I had to help her and darn the socks. And there was an awful lot of darning in those socks those days.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so that's how we said.
And how old would you have been at this time? I mean, like a child of, say, 10 or?
No, I was 15.
Oh, I see.
Wait a minute, 14.
But anyway, they when they got to Hull,
well,
the brother?
The brother met them, and I don't know how he put them up or so on, but he got them this job with this maple syrup farmer. Well, then that's what happened with this maple syrup farmer. He told my grandfather to stay with it and keep the fire going till he came back. And it was the next afternoon, and my grandfather sat out there all night and kept the fire going.
And burnt the maple syrup black.
So anyway, but my grandfather was never any good at finances or anything. It was she who kept the family going. But they had 8 children.
Yeah.
And who was the eldest?
My father.
Oh, your father was
My
the
father
eldest.
was the eldest.
Oh.
He was born in 18. They were married in the 19th of December, 1879. My father was born on the 10th of October, 1880. So you can.
Yeah, so they're about 10 months later. So,
yeah.
Yes, and if they were in hiding 3 weeks, then she probably, she did have morning sickness part of that time on the boat.
Possibly.
Yes, possible. It is possible, yeah.
So then,
so when they got fired at the maple
farm, he went working at different. You see, at that time that was the main thing around the whole Quebec. There was this maple syrup farms.
Yeah.
They're dwindling out now.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they were around there for a while. Then they went to. I don't know how it was that they came over to Toronto. See, that they established themselves in Toronto, and my grandfather went on the stock market, not the stock market that we used to be on.
The
livestock market.
Oh,
and
I
he would
see.
buy and sell, and he didn't do too bad. But when you have 8 children, why you have to do an awful lot. But anyway. But I mean, finally 8 children. But what my grandmother did was he would buy these cows, and they would still be milking. He would bring them home and to feed them up, fatten them up, or feed them up a bit more.
Well, they must have had a little small farm themselves then, or some acreage.
I can remember the place. It was only about 5 acres.
Oh yeah.
Maybe 5 or so acres. But anyway, they would milk these and have the milk for the children. You see,
Yeah.
and my grandmother, you see, in those days they only had these pans to put the milk in to cool and so on.
Right.
She'd take a little bit of the cream off the top the next morning, and she churned butter and sold it she sold it at 18 cents a pound. And at one time she says, I sold it as low as 18 cents a pound, but then it went up to 25 cents a pound.
Yeah.
But anyway, so she sold, and she says, I pocketed it. I didn't. She says, I never got to a bank. She says, I didn't even know what a bank was, or didn't see a bank.
Yeah.
She says, I pocketed it. And do you know that she bought a lot? Not far from there, I can remember the lot, too. She bought this lot for $100. You know, this was in the 1880s, you know. I mean, I'm talking back as far back as that.
Boy, that's 400 or 500 pounds of butter she had to make.
No, but she paid a down payment on it.
Oh, I see.
Paid a down payment, and she says, you know, she says, I got a hold of a man that he would build me a four-room house on there, and I could pay him by degrees. Well, she says, grandfather, after he saw that things were going pretty nice with that setup, well, he did let her have some money. But, I mean, she...
and then did she rent this place out, you mean?
She sold it. And
she sold it.
She made it. It cost her $1,000 to get this on, and she sold it for $4,000.
Oh,
and just at a time when things, she said, picked right up. She says, I'm going to have my tea.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that really would have been
and so anyway, so she got this $4,000, and she bought 3 more lots. She bought 3 more lots and built it, and so she got enough out of that, and she bought the Arundel farm, the Milton farm.
Mm-hmm.
The farm at Milton, where the farm where I sat and heard all this.
Yeah.
And then Uncle Alan, you see, got it afterwards. You see.
How many? They had 8 kids. Who were all the kids? Like, what were they?
There was John, then Uncle Fred. They haven't heard me speak of Uncle Fred. Uncle Fred, he was the money maker in the whole family.
Who did he have children?
No, they didn't have any. They didn't have any children.
Mm-hmm.
But he made his money in the First World War. But he went into the livestock market, and you see, that was big money in the war because of meat going to the soldiers and so on. So they had a real fancy place in what we call West Toronto. It was like West Vancouver, you know. So anyway, there's Uncle Fred, then Uncle Bob, that was Aunt Tilly's husband.
Yeah.
Then there was Aunt Elizabeth, that was Uncle Roy's wife.
Yeah.
And then there was Uncle Charlie, Aunt May. I'm giving you 6, is it?
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. No, what is it? John, Grandpa.
John. Oh, yeah.
John.
Fred.
Bob. Charlie.
Elizabeth. And then Charlie. Adam.
Adam, I remember.
Yeah.
I thought he was
the youngest one.
Oh, yeah.
He was the youngest one. But there was May. There's one more.
How many girls were there then?
2 girls, May and Elizabeth.
Yeah, so 6 boys.
Yeah, 6 boys.
Oh, well, maybe you'll think of it.
I've got it down someplace, too, to tell you the truth. I remember, because I got it down someplace.
I'll just shut off for a minute while you...
Yeah. What was the difference in the ages between the eldest and the youngest?
Okay.
John,
John,
Fred,
Fred,
Bob,
Bob,
Elizabeth,
Elizabeth,
Charlie,
Charlie,
May,
May.
Alan and Adam.
Adam.
That's
Okay,
the
that's
eight.
the eight.
That's
Yeah.
the eight.
That's the
Yeah.
eight,
That's
yes.
the eight.
Okay.
I couldn't think of.
Yeah. And are any of them left?
No,
No, they're all gone now.
they're. Do you know they're all gone?
Yeah.
They're all gone.
Well, that's understandable though.
Yeah.
Like, how long ago did Uncle Adam die? Do you remember? Like,
Oh well, he died quite a few years ago. But you see, he had died with a heart attack.
You know,
That
wasn't there? Weren't you born around the same time as the youngest one?
no, because Adam was 9 when your parents were married. So you must have been 10 or
okay,
so
yeah,
when
okay.
Adam.
Yeah.
Adam must have been about 10 or so when you were born.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Anyway, they bought this farm.
They bought this farm, and Uncle Charlie, he never married he didn't marry till he was in his 40s. He was about 40 when he married, but he took care of the farm. Grandpa, of course, helped hay and so on.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
helped in that. But Grandpa got away with. I tell you, I never knew of any lazier man than my grandfather Armstrong.
Yeah.
Honestly, he could get out. We could get out of doing anything.
So it was your grandmother that was the real.
Oh, she was the goer. She was
And
the.
yet she had been raised to do nothing really.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
And yet he
Well,
had
anyway,
been raised to work. So it's
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
But-
these Grahams now,
Mhm.
the way the Grahams come in, they were cousins of hers, and they opened up a big dress shop dressmaking shop. You see, they made the dresses.
Yeah,
don't they?
yeah.
A dressmaking shop in Toronto, and there
So
were
they
three.
came over too.
Well, they
came
were
over later.
here, I think. I mean, they must have been here.
Were they? Did they also have a lot of money? These Grahams? Like
I didn't know too much.
Was that her sister? You mean? Or?
No, her cousins.
Or
They were
cousins,
cousins,
okay.
Grahams. And I went and visited one. I remember visiting one, and you know, isn't it funny? See, how old would I be in 1919? I was 15. You see, I was 15.
Yeah.
I went back east with cousin Mary. You know.
Oh.
I went with her. I mean, that's how I got chaperoned back to Ontario.
Mhm.
But I went to this Mrs. Graham's. Oh, Annie Graham was her name. And she had sent word. There was no phones or anything there, even at that time. And that was
Mhm.
1919. And she had sent with one of the, I think it was a boy from an orphan's home she had. They were helping them.
Mhm.
And they sent this note over to my grandmother to let me come over and visit her. Well, my grandmother wasn't so anxious about me going over to visit her for some reason or other. I never did find out what that was. But
Mhm.
anyway, but I did get over to visit her.
Mhm.
Well, was I ever shocked to find she was a pleasant, lovely person. A wooden leg, and I didn't know she even had a wooden leg. And honest to goodness, and it was just this wooden leg. And you know,
Yeah. Was it a peg or did it have a foot on it?
no, just a pig.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny your grandmother hadn't mentioned it to you.
She never mentioned anything about her. She never mentioned anything about her.
Yeah.
But
Did your
speaking of my grandmother again,
Mhm.
you see, her father disowned her because of
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
And so it was after my father died that it was sent supposedly to my grandmother. And she got this is another $600 that you were talking about. It was $600, and then when my grandmother's will was read out, she sent that. My father is dead,
Yeah.
and she sent that to my mother, and my mother divided it between the three of us, between Waverly and Mary and me. And Waverly got a cow. And Waverly got, this was when he was on the farm.
Yeah.
He got a cow. I don't know. Mary got this old sewing machine and something more. I don't know just what that was. And I got that fur coat, So that's what that's how she divided it up. But it was, I forget how long after my father passed away.
This was in the will, or like?
Well, it must have been
Must have
because
been in the will.
must
So
have
your
been because
grandmother's will.
otherwise my mother wouldn't have
Yes,
got it.
No.
but did your grandmother have any contact with her sisters or her parents ever again?
No, they wouldn't. They
Not the sisters
They
either?
absolutely disowned her. They absolutely. She did hear some of what went on over there through these grains.
Yes.
But no direct contact at all.
But their name again was Campbell.
Campbell.
Yeah.
Campbell. And I
Yeah.
don't even know what his first name was or anything, but that
What
was.
about Grandma's parents?
Grandma's parents, you see, Grandpa Campbell, why he was a bobby in Belfast,
Oh,
but they were Scotch. He came over from Scotland to become a policeman in Belfast. My grandmother was from Stranraer, Scotland.
Oh, yes,
Stranraer, Scotland, and they were in. My mother was born in Belfast, you see, and she was 10 years old when they came over.
Oh, they came.
Yeah.
And
And-
where did they go to when they?
Toronto.
Oh, they went to Toronto.
Well,
too.
that's how they. My father and mother met up with one another, and it was funny. Who was I telling this to? Who was I talking to? Oh, I guess it was Vivian. You see, grandmother Armstrong always had a big Christmas dinner. It was a big family,
Right.
and Christmas was with grandmother Armstrong, and New Year's was with grandmother Campbell because they recognized New Year's more than Christmas than
Scotch.
the Scotch did.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Well, grandmother Armstrong only joined the Anglican Church after I can remember. I mean, I think it was about the first year that I was down in the East, and she hadn't joined any church until then. But they belonged to the Anglican Church, and you see, my grandmother Campbell, she was definitely Methodist.
Yeah.
They were definitely Methodist. But then grandfather came out here, and the first thing he got was a floor walker's job at Eaton's in Toronto. And then
That's your grandfather Campbell?
Campbell.
Oh, I see. So I see. Yeah, okay. Grandma was 10 years old and the family moved out here.
My
Toronto,
mother,
Yeah,
my mother was 10 years old. And
Yeah.
Oh.
So anyway, then he wasn't there very long, and he had taken a course in the old country. You see, the umbrella making.
Oh yeah.
You know, when I was Megan's age, I had a summer umbrella with cherries on it. I had a black one for rain. I had a red one with frills around it for fancy. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I had one that I liked the best was looked like lilacs.
Oh,
I mean lilac color.
Yeah.
I as a kid had at his age I had all sorts of umbrellas sort of way.
Yeah.
But he opened an umbrella shop in Toronto, and he did very well. But my grandmother Campbell, you see, Uncle Colin, you met Uncle Colin.
Yeah.
He was just her white-haired boy. And he came out to Homestead out of Edmonton there. And she didn't... so she, after Uncle Colin left to come out here, she took the notion and she opened up a candy store. and she did very well. You know,
Who your
my grandmother Campbell
Oh, yeah.
opened up this on Young Street, you know, in the North Young Street, and she did very well, but she yearned. Well, you see, it took 3 years for him to prove up on this homestead up here, and he was pretty near proved up when she took the notion that they just had to come out to call. They just had to come out to call. And poor Grandpa, he never took to the West at all. But he had to sell his shop and
His
everything.
umbrella shop.
Yes, and that, yeah. And I can remember Uncle Colin, we came out, landed in Bratton on the 1st of April, 1912, and about 3 weeks later, well, I can remember my mother, she must have been looking out or what, she says, I think that's Colin coming, walking towards the place. We were about 2 miles from Bratton, 2.5 maybe. So anyway, and it was, and my grandmother had had a heart attack, and he had come down to take us, and what I can remember about him is that he had this roll of bills, this, you know, in this pocket, in the suit pocket, and this roll of bills, and here it showed all the bills on the top of it. You daren't do that these days. You'd be mugged, as it were.
So, your mother had, Colin was her brother, and she had other brothers, didn't she?
See, I'm named after her. There was mother was the oldest. Lilly was next, which I'm named after.
Oh.
Then there was Colin, and then there was Will, and the baby only lived about, I think, a couple of weeks.
That was Will?
Will.
Yeah. Well, how about this Lilly?
Oh, she died with diphtheria.
As a young person?
Oh, I think she was only about 8.
Oh, so really just the two of them grew up?
Yes, oh yes. And there was
just your mother and Colin?
Just about 10 years apart. I mean, there was 10 years in their ages.
I
So the two other girls, I guess it was, that died.
No, Will was the little boy. There was 2 girls and 2 boys.
Yeah.
But wasn't it funny that Uncle Colin died just 4 months after? See, he was 10 years younger. And I can remember us standing in the. You weren't there. Us standing in the station, and I said, "How are you keeping, Uncle Colin, yourself?" Just for something to say, and he says, "Oh, you have to take life as you find it." And here he was suffering. He was going with cancer himself.
Oh.
And he paid for that whole funeral and everything. You know.
Oh, this was your mother's funeral.
Yes. He paid for everything.
Was she she was a housekeeper for him?
Oh, she wasn't just exactly a housekeeper in this way.
Well, no, I
mean,
she looked after him in a sense.
He didn't like her staying on the farm alone there. After Dad passed away, you see, she was there a few years. How many years? 3 years, was it? But anyway, and so then Aunt Jan took sick. His wife. And he wrote Mother and asked her would she like to come and live with him to help Jan out. That Jan wasn't very well. Well, Jan had this emphysema. And
but didn't your mother live with Aunt Mary too?
Oh yes. Oh, you see, after she left the farm, why she lived with Aunt Mary after Aunt Jan passed away. You see.
Oh,
for a while. See. Then she went. It was through Mary that she went back to Uncle Colin. Aunt Mary couldn't stand. She couldn't stand Mother. Mother would interfere with how she was doing with the children and so on, and they couldn't see things together.
No.
So anyway, so she went back to Uncle Colin. And then Uncle Colin said, "You see, Mother, you see, took us couple of slight strokes and was found on the floor and so on. And he said that out where they lived was out of Edmonton, and he had bought this place to get away from income tax, and here it had oil royalties on it. So anyway, a lovely place apparently, and so then that's when she went in to live with this.
Yeah, where was she living when she died?
You know, with that Mr. and Mrs. They were friends. That they knew one. See, when Grandma was taking care of Aunt Jan, they were up at Luster, up in the mine. You know, where Uncle Colin was. He was not bookkeeper. You know, he was like Jay,
An accountant.
and he was an accountant for the mining company. And then he
How did he went out and homesteaded originally?
Yeah.
But then he must have taken courses or something to become an accountant.
He did. He took this correspondent course. He got him. He was clever. I mean,
he must have been.
He was.
And didn't he have? How many children did he have? He had Bruce.
Bruce and
Hugh.
And
a girl.
And Janet.
Because both the boys have done very well, haven't they?
Well, you know, I must ask Mary again. Bruce was going he was going to try for mayor of Edmonton.
Yes.
I haven't heard anything of. But Hugh was over in Africa, doing something similar to Grant.
Yes.
I mean,
that's right.
That sort
and
of
his wife was Sheila.
Yeah.
What was your grandma Campbell's maiden name?
Rogers.
That's a Scotch name too?
Yeah. Well, you see, and my mother was Margaret Rogers Campbell.
Oh, so she was, she had the,
Yeah.
So,
see that,
so
that's all through our family, we had to have the family name. That's why I got Campbell.
Sure.
Well, what were the Rogers family like? What?
Never heard much about them. In fact, my mother said that she didn't think that Grandma had any brothers or sisters. That she didn't think. So you see, she didn't know. She didn't think that Grandma had any brothers or sisters. So I don't know much about them at all.
But she was the one that had the candy store.
Yeah.
So I guess she didn't talk about her family very much.
No, she mustn't have. And of course, you see, I was young and I didn't.
Yeah.
Wasn't.
So what your grandparents were living on the farm, I guess, when my grandpa, your father, grew up, I guess. So
no, when my father grew up, they were he was in this livestock market, and they had this little place when he was growing up.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
And, and that's where, you see, then my father, because of that, he got into the butchering. You see, he was a butcher.
I see, yeah.
He was a butcher by trade.
In Toronto.
In Toronto.
I see. And
not in Toronto, in Kettleby, which is North Toronto.
Oh, yeah. And he met your mother, Grandma, my grandma.
Well, you know, they only lived blocks apart. You see them. In fact, I think they went to the same school. You know, something. It was only just they weren't very.
Yeah.
But.
So how they obviously got married in Toronto and when did they decide to come out to homestead?
Do you know what? Uncle Alan took the notion to come out and homestead, and he came back with glowing. He got a homestead. He came back. I can remember him saying this. He came back with glowing things of the prairie. He says you can throw wheat on the prairie and it'll grow. You don't even need to plow. You know what I mean? Yeah. He came back with all this. So anyway, and that's what got my father going. And then, of course, then Aunt Elizabeth came out as sister, you see, a house kept for Uncle Alan for a year. And she met Uncle Roy, and that's how she come met Uncle Roy. He had another homestead not far away.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how. But
Well, before they left, I guess they, he must have done all right because he bought some cattle to bring out with him, didn't he?
oh yes. Well, my father brought cattle. And
That's what I mean, your father, yeah.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh, my father brought
I
cattle.
remember you telling them they came out in the wintertime?
Oh, okay. It was March. You see,
March.
we they landed here about the 1st of March. We landed in my mother and Waverly and I, we landed the first day of April, and my mother often said it was the most foolish thing she ever did. April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But they shipped the cattle on the.
Oh yes, and you know, it's funny how some things stick in your mind. Was at
Thunder Bay?
Thunder Bay. What was Thunder Bay called before? River. White River. White River. There's a White River near Thunder Bay there or something. This White River. Anyway, they were put on a siding, and the engine went conked or something, and they were waiting for this engine to come, and they were there for 2 days, and this one cow that my father had bought, she had this calf, and it was a heifer, and she was always known, as long as I can remember, Rose of White River.
Oh, yeah.
And she got the whole name, Rose of White River, a cow.
Yeah.
Rose
But
of White River.
it was really cold, wasn't it?
Oh, and apparently they didn't think they could save the calf. But she was one of the good milkers too.
Oh, yeah.
But when she got milking.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then.
But, how did they know to come to McCrory though? I mean, was it Uncle Alan that?
Well, you see, Uncle Alan, it was through Winnipeg. You see, you got your homesteads in those early days. It was through through Winnipeg, and so he got located there, and then it was through Uncle Alan that Dad got.
Well, where would they'd leave Winnipeg and come across, but McCrory wasn't on the main line, was it?
McCrory wasn't even there.
Oh.
McCrory.
Oh no, it was Bratton you got off.
We got off of Bratton.
But that must have been a spur line, was it?
It only went down as far as Bercy and turned around at that time.
Okay, so it had to be a spur line then. So you'd probably did you go to Regina and then change trains or something?
No, Saskatoon.
Oh, Saskatoon. Okay.
When we went straight from Winnipeg up to Saskatoon. And I can remember that morning as plain as day, being hauled out of bed. My mother hauled me out of bed and got my shoes on me, and one sock was on and one sock was off. And she had told the fellow downstairs to be sure we had to go and get on the train at 5 o'clock in the morning. And word to get on the train at 5 o'clock in the morning. But anyway, the train was pulling out. When we were only about half a block from the train, and we were both. Of course, you see, I was like Megan, you see, and Waverly was like Danielle, you see. And here we were crying our heads off. My mother said, come on. And she had all this luggage and stuff. And the train was starting to pull out. And the train engineer back. And he says, oh, I knew there was a lady with 2 children coming. He says, I kept watching. Oh, they could see for miles around there then. You know, I mean, there was nothing, just, he said he saw us coming down the street and that. So anyway, Dad insulted you about that trip. But we got as far as Delisle, and of course they did stop there they stopped there to have breakfast.
Oh.
You see, they stopped there.
Yeah.
I don't know what time to have breakfast. But this here salesman said it was mud galore. You know what that time of the spring, mud galore. Yeah, well, so this salesman said, "Oh, lady," he says, "you couldn't get over there to the hotel." He says, "I'll bring you something over."
Yeah.
And Mother says, "I was sure glad to," because she says, "I didn't know what I was going to do with you two kids in that mud." So anyway, he come over and he, you know, it was anything but genteel. But the bread, I can remember the bread must have been about that thick.
Yeah.
But anyway, the whole thing looked so darn thick to me. Anyway, it was one egg. One egg was in this bread. That was our breakfast.
Yeah.
And I apparently, it was me. I looked at it, I said, "Do I have to put my mouth over that?"
Yeah.
She said, Mother says, "I could have slapped the whole thing in your face." She says, he'd come through all that mud with this stuff for you.
Yeah.
And so, anyway.
So Grandpa must have gone on the head.
Oh, well, he was on a month ahead.
Oh,
you see, they unloaded all the effects.
Oh, I see.
They had and the tad insult to that setup was my Aunt Elizabeth, who had been out here the year before. She says, "Oh, Maggie," that's my mother. They called Margaret, but they always called her Maggie. She said, "Oh, Maggie, take everything." She says, "You'll need everything." Well, you see, my father had been manager of the dairy department on Goodwin and Wart's whiskey farm, and she had a big oak dining room suite and a big oak bedroom suite and a piano and everything. And so here, land into one room, one room shack that Uncle Allen had. The stove was on the one end and the beds were on the other end. And honest to goodness, it was just so. They, you know, these upholstered seats that you have, upholstered chairs for dining room chairs. Well, you know, so anyway, where to put the things? So they had put them in a granary, you know, where they had started going, and the mice got into everything. And the mice got into the piano too, you see, and they had no way of tuning the piano after that. But,
well, Grandpa was a butcher in Toronto, but then he got this job at Good or Mort's farm or something.
Oh yes. Oh, but he had. You see, he had the small farm at Kettleby where I was born, and where my mother fell out of the pear tree, sort of way. But he got it from there. I mean, he wasn't right from Toronto to that. He was from this Kettleby farm, and he had just rented it. You know, he didn't own anything. He had rented it.
He rented the Kettleby farm, but he worked at Good or Mort's?
No, he just worked on the Kettleby farm. I mean, they had grew produce, and he did do some butchering and this.
But what did he do at Good or Mort's then?
That was quite a big deal. That they supplied the biggest hotels in Toronto with milk. There was I think it was 40 cows.
Oh yeah.
But, you know, I mean, it's big.
But he did this as well as run his farm?
No. He finished off the farm and came to the Good and Mort's. I mean, it wasn't connected up together at all.
I see.
But that way. And then, of course, when Uncle Allen brought all this rosy pictures from the West, then he decided, and Mother didn't want to come at all. But anyway, that's how.
So you stayed in Uncle Allen's.
Well, we were there. You see, we were there that first winter, for I know it was just terribly crowded.
Were you able to get a crop that first year you were there?
Oh no. I'm going to say that all. I remember my dad having to sleep and live down on this farm, on this homestead, because you had to really be on it for the 3 years to prove it up.
Yeah.
And so he would be down there, but then he had built this granary and lived in this granary. And we were up with Uncle. Then he rented the Jackson place, which I don't know whether you remember. Do you remember us when we went back there in 1939? Do you remember us going up to what we called the Jackson place, the Campbell place? No.
Can't remember that. I remember driving around quite a bit, but I don't remember.
Well, anyway, we rented. My dad rented that for. I think we were. Well, we were there till after Aunt Mary was born, and she was born on the 13th of September, 1913, and we had gone in 1912. So
Yeah.
we were up at the Jackson place at that time, and just when so this granary, well, of course, my dad had great big ideas, but he was going to build this house for us and that, but there was just no money to build any house.
I was going to say, how did they survive? I mean,
I tell you that, I can't, you see, I was young, and I don't, I didn't realize that they went through some hell. Really, they did. But anyway, this granary was the main part of the house, even yet, back there. It's the main part of the house, and then built onto it, you see, and so on. But that was the granary that was supposed to be the granary.
Yeah.
Oh, Bev, you're doing things out there that I don't.
Oh, I just put cooked some potatoes too.
Yeah.
Well, you see,
What?
Grandfather had gone to the livestock market. And
Oh, I see. So this was before he had the farm.
no, this is on the farm.
On the farm. Oh.
Yeah, but you see, he meddled back and forth he had gone to, and the pears were ready for picking.
Yeah.
And they needed the money my mother said, I needed some clothes for you, telling me about it. She said, I needed some clothes for you. And so she says, I thought, well, I'll just go out and pick a box and it'd be ready for your dad to take to town the next morning.
Yeah.
And this is what happened.
So she would buy you a nightshirt or some diapers or something like that.
Well, but
yeah, but she picked these pears and she fell out of the pear tree.
She didn't get picking very many till she fell out of the tree. Well, then this next.
Was she all alone up there? Or?
Well, I don't know how she was able to get this neighbor woman. Mrs. Barnes was her name. But anyway, she got her, and then I don't know just
She
how.
didn't go to a hospital, obviously, because
They didn't do those things in those days. They didn't.
But somebody must have called the doctor, didn't they?
Oh yes, I mean, I think I don't know just. But everybody scurried around. I know that's what happened. Everybody scurried around, and the doctor did arrive there.
Yeah.
But
it was after you were born, I guess.
Well, all about the same time or something.
Yeah.
I don't know just what that part.
But then he said.
Well, then you see, there was no way. My mother didn't have anything there to take care of me or herself either. So they moved us down into Grandma and Grandpa Campbell lived on the lakefront in Toronto, and that's where I say that my brother's name is on this corner, this Waverly Road and lakefront, and so took me down there, and my grandmother, who knew the situation with the financial situation, that she had everything there to take care of a child, take care of me. That's how they come.
This was your dad's?
No, this was my mother's mother.
Oh, your mother's mother. Oh. Your Grandma Campbell.
The Campbell.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my mother was there for, I think she was there for a month before she went back to.
Yeah. But like, what month was she in when she fell? I mean, how?
They figured it was between 7 and 7.5 months. They don't think it was as much as 7.5, but it was between 7 and 7.5 is what I've been told.
And how much did you weigh?
Oh, well, they didn't know how much I weighed. They put this 2 pound of butter on, one of these scales that are on each side. Why, they put this 2 pound of butter on one side and put me on the other side, and I didn't pull the 2 pound of butter down. So
Is
that's
that right?
Yeah.
And the doctors just give up.
Well, I don't think he gave up exactly, but he didn't want to be bothered straight away.
Oh, yeah. So it was the midwife that.
Well, you see, he says, I think she was fussing a bit or something, this midwife was. But anyway, he says, oh, don't bother. Now just put her on the pillow. Don't bother dressing her. It'll be okay. And she says, man, there'd be no luck about it.
Oh, yeah.
Man, she said, there'd be no luck about it. So she says, my mother says, there was nothing to dress me in, but she says, there was an old blouse that my mother, a white blouse that my mother had with this ragamuffin sleeve, this great big sleeve that they used to wear, and they still do now even. And she put me in that, in the sleeve.
Yeah.
Is that those?
No.
No. That's just one.
Well, then they, what did they do? Put you by the oven, or?
Yeah. Well, did you see? It was October.
Yeah.
You see, and it was getting cold.
Yeah.
And I was raised on the oven door.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just.
Yeah.
But then you see, they took me down to my grandmother's, and she still put me on the oven door.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was. You see, in those days they didn't have the heating that you can keep the place warm. The bedrooms were cold and all this sort of thing. So I apparently grew up on the oven door for a while, and I don't know how long.
But obviously the doctor didn't think you were going to live.
Well, I don't know, but he didn't seem as if he wanted anybody to put too much trouble on me anyway. But anyway, he says, oh, just put her on the pillow, and that'll be all right.
And was this on Goodrem Mort's farm, or?
No, it was on the Kettleby farm.
Kettleby farm.
Yes, it was on the.
So it was after you were born that Grandpa went to the Goodrem Mort's farm.
Oh yes, I think I was 2. I think Waverly was born before he went on to the.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, 2 years. 2 years or 2.5 years or something. Yeah. He was only there. He was there about 4 years. So where's that?
Talk about the way people take risks today, but the risk that your parents and grandparents took was. I don't think anybody would think of doing those things today.
No, they would throw up their hat. Yeah. Well, they had to if they were going to live, I suppose. That sort of way.
Yeah. When you got to McCrory, or to the farm anyway, the homestead, how long was it before you got into your own place? Like, Grandpa built this, what do you call it, granary, but then you must have moved into that.
Yeah, we moved right into it.
Oh, yeah.
Moved right into it.
That same year, or were you in there the first winter, or?
We're in there. We were in the winter of 1914. I know that. Because that was the winter of the war.
Yeah.
And we were in there in 1914. So just the summer of 1914 we were there. So you see, Mary was born September 1913. She was just a baby, you see, when we moved there.
So you must have got a crop off in 1914 then, eh?
I think it was a small, you see, and you know that my father did the first plowing with oxen.
Did he?
Yeah.
Did he borrow them, or?
Yes. Well, he rented them, they exchanged things sort of way. You've heard me speak of this Mr. and Mrs. Rye.
Yeah.
Well, they had this team of oxen,
Yeah.
and they plowed enough for a garden. I remember them plowing enough for a garden, and then they got don't know, just,
But how long, like what I was wondering is how long it took him from the time he got the homestead to the time he could take out a cash crop, you might say, of grain and
you know,
so on.
honest to goodness, I can't remember that. You know
Well, of
what I
course,
mean?
you were pretty young, but I mean, it's.
I can't remember how that was, but believe you me, I know that, I can remember my mother crying or going to bed, you know what I mean? Things were so tight, you know, it's so, miserable, you know what I mean? You didn't know where the next thing, I can remember doing a thing once, these, Murrays, these neighbors, why, this Janet Murray, why, she wanted to come and stay overnight with me. Well, then, of course, she was there for supper. And I remember, Mother had this bacon with boiled rice and bacon. To stretch the bacon out, she boiled this rice and put it into a mold with this bacon. And I remember passing this to Janet, and my mother took one look at me. It was the last bit that there was in the place, and here I handed it to Janet. I said, have some more, Janet.
Yeah.
She could have throttled me, you know, because...
Yeah, and she probably took it, did she?
Oh, yes, it was done. And she said, and later in the year, she says, and you know, that was for your dad's next meal next day, she said.
Yeah.
So,
You had a brother, no, you had an uncle, was it, or someone that sleepwalked?
Uncle Charlie did that,
Did he? Because I remember you telling me about the things they used to go through to try and stop him from sleepwalking.
Yeah, I remember Uncle Charlie it was, and you know, they put water at the foot of the stairs. You see, he slept upstairs, and he
put a pan of water.
They put the pan of water, and they put this pan of water, and he stepped around this pan of water. It never stepped into that pan of water, and they had quite a big, more of a bread pan, and it was big, you know, this big sort of way, but round. It was round, and so they put it different places and step around that pan of water.
But he used to, didn't they live across from a football field or something?
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, I remember you telling me something, he'd get up in a holler or something, and
Yes.
one time he threw something out the window thinking he was throwing a football.
Yes, and it was the chamber.
The chamber pot. What, was it an enamel one or a china one?
It was a china one,
And it would have broken.
It broke. So, honestly, they did everything to try to stop him, and I guess he just grew out of it, you know, because he was married to this, there's 2 children from that marriage, but he didn't marry till he was in his 40s, you see.
So who are those children? I've never heard you speak of them.
No, you see, they're cousins of mine, maybe, and they've never contacted at all. And
that's very understandable.
Margie's the girl's name, and what was the girl? Billy. Margie and Billy are the 2. I have pictures of them. Aunt May sent me pictures of them. But that was after Uncle Charlie passed away. And it's funny, Uncle Charlie met me at the train in 1919 when I went down to Toronto and took me to this Uncle Andy's place and that. And he sort of kind of looked after me sort of, in that way.
Yeah, well, you went back to Toronto, didn't you?
In 1919.
Ah, so you were how old then?
15.
15.
Yeah.
But how long did you stay back there?
1922.
Oh, and that's when you worked for that Dr. Scales?
Dr. Skeels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you went back and you took a business course.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you were away from the farm. with them. And who did you stay with? Like, did you?
Well, isn't it funny? See, my people didn't have anything, and it was Aunt May that kept me when I went back there. Then, I remember she $7 a week was what she paid Mrs. Green for room and board for me. That I was near. See, she was principal of the Shaw's Business School down there, and it was through that I got in
That
there.
was a lot of money in those days.
Well, it was $7 a week.
$1 a day.
Yeah, because I remember when I went to Vancouver and worked, and that was when 47 or something? 46. I paid $25 a month for room and board.
Well, and I remember it was
That was
she paid this more so as I would not have to take a streetcar.
Mm-hmm.
It was close to the
Right.
college. So anyway, this Mrs. Green was the.
Yeah.
Did you, like, when you were down there, like, did you ever take a trip back to the farm?
Oh no, no.
You couldn't afford that.
No.
No.
So you went to school, like, for those 2 or 3 years, eh?
No, I only took the course, you see, and it was about a year.
Oh,
Then the first job that I had was with the Sunlight Soap people. I mean,
Yeah. And doing what? Like
typing.
Oh.
And then
Then
you worked for this doctor for.
Then I got in with Dr. Skeels, and I was there about already 3 years, I guess. 2.5 maybe years.
Oh, yeah.
And then I came back home. You see, I came back, and that's how Dr. Skeels thought I should go in for nursing.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how I come to go in at Saskatoon. Of course, that was a wreck. You know, I mean, it was a failure certainly. But anyway, that was in 1924. 1924. When I came back.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah. Well, that's.
Didn't tell Dad what had happened, or he says I would have got a licking. He couldn't told his dad.
Difference in the way people feel about their children nowadays.
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
I was going to say, and I'm going to say, I think that really, like, maybe what I would say would, Walter, Dad would never have hit anybody. You know, I mean, it would have had to have been just in self-defense or something like that. But what I mean is that he wasn't like his dad at all.
No.
You know, he wasn't. His dad was really cruel.
And usually the children who have been abuse themselves. I mean, they say that all the
yes,
time.
they talk about it. They
talk about it.
They
so
talk
much.
about it, and you could never.
How about? Do you think the Sid might have abused people? Don't you think?
Oh yes. Well, I tell you, I'm only going by Lilly. His first wife. Why, she said that she sat in a rocking chair, slept in a rocking chair at the children's bedroom door many nights. She says so that he was going to go in and give them a licking for not shutting the hen house door or something, some thing like that.
It's awful, really.
But she said that many nights she slept in that. It was a rocking chair that was kind of long, and
he wasn't a very big man, though, was he? No, which might have been a bit of a help because and was she pretty good sized woman?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
She was bigger than you.
yes,
Well, that was good.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, I was gonna, like, Dad, the family was in Pilsley, right?
Pills, that's where Dad was born, was
Yeah.
Pilsley in England.
Yeah.
And he got Dad got allowance. The children got allowance. Dad got allowance and he put it in the bank. And Aunt Nellie got the allowance and she spent everything and asked Dad if Dad would buy a few candies. Why, she'd ask him for a candy purse. She wouldn't buy any to give it. She spent everything she had. And so that's the difference between those two.
Yeah.
But anyway, he put that in the bank, thinking that he had something. His dad took that out and paid his son's fare over to Canada with the money that he had saved himself. Now those are the things that did happen, but nobody knows. And in fact, Aunt Nellie, I said to Dad sometimes, says, why don't you tell her or speak up when you hear her say she was praised. She thought a lot of her dad, but he babied her. He babied her.
He treated the girls
Oh.
differently than the boys.
Yes. Well, there was only Walter and Sid. Sid, of course, there was, but Bill.
He was so much younger.
Oh, he was the youngest one, and Grandma Spetch kept him under her wing. He didn't touch Bill, but she didn't seem to have the same support to the other ones at all. But of
Well,
course,
it was like Dad had Aunt Nellie as a sister, and
there's Muriel and Elizabeth and Bill. You see in that.
okay, yeah. And Elizabeth was the one that died
At
while
20
they were at All Creek.
Yes. She was 21.
She was 21.
And what was it she died from?
Appendicitis. You see, it ruptured. You see, and they couldn't to get out of there. You see, and it was just. It was just about the time that the railway went in there, but they didn't get her out in time, you see. You know, the railway only went up one day and back on the third day or so. You know what I mean? It was not, you know what I mean? They didn't get her out in time. But I can remember Mr. McLeod. I don't know whether you remember Mr. McLeod, one of the conductors, when Grandpa Spetch passed away. We thought, the train was due in a short, an hour, I think it was. But you know, there was so much to see and so I said, when we got down to the railway station, I said to Mr. McLeod, I says, so the train was late, so that it made it in not good time, but not much to spare. But anyway, I said to him, I says, I'm so glad so glad that you were late. I says, or we mightn't have made it, you know. He says, never mind. He says, I would have waited for you. This Mr. he was a nice fellow.
Well, now, what
waited.
were you doing down there at the station? What do you mean? Like, what did you?
I was down with the body. You see, they're bringing the body out to be buried out in Vancouver. He's buried in Vancouver.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
And then we had to get Mother.
But isn't someone buried up in Bergen? Wasn't that
This was the Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
And you know.
Yeah, but she was in Vancouver when she died.
Oh yes, but they took. And you know, it's the funniest thing. Of course, Grandpa Spetch did mix up some sulfur and Vaseline and stuff together, and he did help the Indians with some of their sores and what have you, and they thought quite a bit of him because he did mix up a lot of junk. I don't know whether it was, but it worked sort of way.
Yeah.
You know, that
well,
sort
something with sulfur in it would definitely help some sort of
yes. Well, anyway, there was
problem.
that, and then different things he did. know, I don't know, but it's rather laughable how. But anyway, do you know he had those Indians. They brought their band up at the burial of Lizzie. Wasn't that awful? Oh, gee whiz. Well, but you know now. There's a logging road right, it was right, you know, that was a nice little, it was up from the regular road on a little knoll, a flat knoll. We went down there so many Sundays and worked on the grave, you know, weeded it and so on. And, you know, now there's a logging road right through there. So that's why I believe in cremation, because look at that, there's nothing, nobody knows anything about that now.
No, well,
when, what was Grandma's maiden name?
Thompson.
Oh, she was Thompson.
And she had a nice family. Her family was nice, and her father was a very good living man. The story that Dad tells me about him was, he called him Grandpa Thompson. Why, he said, they were all coal miners, you know, there. And this one old guy, well, they just went from the coal mine to the pub for near, you know, I mean, they just lived a lot of them lived that way. So anyway, he said, this man wouldn't come to church, or they were, you know, I don't know whether they were Methodist or Congregational. It was, I believe Methodist, but I'm not, but it was one of the two. So anyway, he said, oh, he hadn't anything to wear to go to church. Grandpa Thompson was trying to get him to go to church. He says, I've only got my overalls. He says, well, I'll go in overalls if you'll come to church. I'll go in overalls with you. He put on overalls and went to church and sat beside this man. It got him to go to church and sat beside this man. You know, and he, of course, in those days, when they all, you know, you dressed up to go to church, but he put on overalls to go with this man. This is one of the things that Grandpa Thompson, and apparently he was a very good living man and did do a lot of good amongst them, got them out of the, not the, they don't, the pub they call them over there, not the beer parlor, but I mean, he got a lot of people working on gardens and different things that got them away from, there was an awful lot of drinking in those coal mining places, a lot of drinking. And he said he didn't know, you see, he was so young, he didn't notice it, but Grandma Spetch told me, she says there was lots of them who were drunk from the time they got off work on. They worked Saturdays, you see. Yeah. Just a half a day, I think. But anyway, from Saturday till Monday morning, they were just drunk. You know, that's, and the women, she says, go, you know, they had these aprons that, big white aprons tied around, and she says, many times she said, see these women crying, you know, and using their aprons, you know. It was a tough, sort of a tough place.
Yeah, but, and Grandpa Spetch had been married before, though.
Oh, yes. You see, Sid was Dad's half brother. Yeah. Well, then there was Emily Hockley. Oh, yeah. And I never did.
Was that a half sister?
Yes, but
she was a half sister.
Emily Hockley was.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. But she just died. I mean, she died after we came down here to Vancouver.
Yeah.
But
she'd been up at Birkenau, hasn't she?
I don't think she ever was at Birken, but she was at Owl Creek.
It was Edna that had gone up to.
Oh, Edna was at Birken.
Yeah.
Edna.
And Edna was what, a cousin?
Edna was a cousin. Yeah. You see, this, you know, that's...
Her name was Hicken, wasn't it?
Hicken.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this Uncle Bill that was the printer was Edna's father.
Oh.
That was Edna's father.
Oh, so Edna was a Spetch before she married.
Oh yes, Edna was a Spetch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I
yes.
see. Yeah.
Oh yes, Edna was a Spetch. And there was this one that William was his name, the printer one. And then there was Ralph. Well, that's, you heard, well, in fact, I wrote and told Cousin Mary of both Dad passing away and Aunt Nellie passing away.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not interested in Canadian ones at all. But I mean, I just wanted them to know, you know.
Right.
And so, and Ralph was his, I heard, Uncle Ralph. Ralph and Bill and Samuel. Those, you're not taking this all in now.
Yeah, this is the stuff that I want to keep. You know, I mean, this is, you know, stuff that I didn't know. You know.
Well, I didn't know that it's going on now.
Well, maybe that's just as well.
Yeah. So, but anyway.
But anyway, do you know that it took 12 days to come from there over to Canada? That was in 1907. Poor Grandma Spetch, she was sick as a dog all the way.
Yeah. What kind of boat did they come over on?
Was it a cheap fare, or was it sort of a nice passenger?
No, it was it was
Probably.
second class, I think they called it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think it was called second class. I know it was a pretty rough trip for them all.
Mm-hmm.
And Dad was how old then? 10?
9. You see, that was in 1907, and they arrived here in August 1907, but he was 10 years old in the October.
Oh yeah, I see.
You see, it was really in his 10th year, but he was just only 9 years old. That's all there was
right.
So,
and they arrived, I guess, in Montreal.
They arrived in Montreal, and then, of course, boarded the train for the west.
They knew where to come. I mean, they knew somebody out here?
Grandpa Spetch was going to settle at Calgary. That he came into Alberta at Calgary. Well, when he got there, earlier they had found out Grandma Spetch had a sister, and she disappeared to Canada. Well, how they ever found out or how they ever got in touch with her at all, but they found that she you know where Price's were in Indian Meadows.
Yeah, Indian Meadows. Yeah.
Well, apparently this sister of Grandma Spetch's was in fact, Dad said that was the only happy time that he had when he came over here. Came first. You see, was sent him down there while they were, I think, making an extra room so they had room for all the kids, sort of, at the summit there.
Yeah.
Where the Nylons were, you see. They landed there first.
Yeah, at the south end of Birkin Lake, or Gates Lake.
Yes,
yeah.
But they sent him up to this aunt, you see, was be his aunt, at Indian Meadows, which, I forget how many miles it is, or what part.
Yeah, about 5 miles.
About 5 miles.
Yeah.
Anyway, and he was to help her in the garden and bring in the wood and that. He said he had the happiest time there that he ever had. And he had no pals to play with, no nothing. There was just her and her husband. And they had a boy. And this boy, you see, then, wait a minute, this boy married an Indian. But an Indian from Lytton, from the Lytton Reserve. Well, then Grandma wouldn't have anything wouldn't even speak to her, to her own sister, because of this boy married her son. And of course, do you know, Sid, even the last time we saw Sid, he had kept in touch with that family. Watson was the family. He kept in touch with that family, and they were down here in Richmond the last.
And had this man who'd married the Indian, did they have children? And
Yes.
And did they probably did just fine?
Well, I never did hear too much about about what they did, but they were all, I mean, they were carried on sort of way. Yes. But Grandma Spetch wouldn't have anything to do with them, and so they never did. And so, of course, Dad said at his late hour, after we came down here, it was Sid, I think, said that Walter should get in touch with him. Well, and he said to me, he says, what would be the purpose? He says, I never knew any more than the time that he was 10 years old, or 11, between 10 and 11, I guess it was, at the aunts. That's the last he'd ever heard of them, or that, because they kept it all hush hush. Anything was all hush hush, and because but at that time, you see, they didn't do those things as much as they do now. I mean, they intermarry now, whereas in 1907 you didn't do so much of that.
Yeah, except that there probably were no white girls around for him to marry anyway.
You're right. Yeah.
So
Apparently, Dad said that it was funny when they came and went over to Lytton. They went off at Lytton and went over to Lillywhite, and they were in the. Grandpa Spetch had them in the hotel. The only place to keep them was in the hotel, so he came down to the summit there. So anyway, he said, Dad said that he and Nellie would be real tired, but they would, you see, they both had good voices, and they'd have them up on these tables in the restaurant and they were singing all the, they knew a lot of the English ditty songs, those old country things. And he says, we'd have to sing there, he says, until we were real tired.
Yeah.
Because, there was no good. They got real entertainment out of it.
Sure.
He says, and they'd get an apple. You see, it was in August. You see, and they'd get an apple for sing. He says singing all night and all evening,
And they got an apple.
And they got an apple, and then he says we did like Grandma Spetch said. It was, you see, corn was in at that August. You see, corn, and so this was all new to them. She says, "No, you're not eating that. That's only cow feed." And she wouldn't let the kids eat
a lot of people had that.
No, but she wouldn't let the kids eat it because she said it was only cow feed.
Yeah.
Oh dear, this is really funny.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
They came from Montreal then to Calgary.
They came to Calgary, and he stepped off the train at Calgary and took one look, and he says, "No, we're not stopping there." And they didn't even know about the ones here at Indian Meadows. So that didn't know that they were even coming out. You see, you didn't.
But they knew that the sister was at Indian Meadows.
Oh yes, they must.
Yeah. So they headed out to see them, did they? Or?
Well, he said, "Well, we'll go into British Columbia." You see, when he stepped off the train at Calgary, he didn't like what he saw. So he got back.
Well, was there someone he knew in Calgary?
No.
Oh, I wonder why he chose Calgary.
Well, they said, you see, he came out here because he had asthma.
Oh.
And they said that the prairies was a good place for, suitable for asthma. Well, anyway, Grandma Spetch says it was one awful jumble. She says we were getting off there, and here was they had these English luggage bags, not suitcases. They were kind of a canvas things, but she says we had an awful job getting them back onto the train because the train was ready for going.
You mean they got on the very same train? They didn't even...
Oh no, he just got off and had walked up the platform, and he says, "We're not stopping here." He says, "Get back on the train." And so anyway, so they came over as far as Lytton, got off at Lytton, and that's where they took the stagecoach from Lytton over to Lillooet. And I've come over this lots of time, that it was an awful trail at that time. And there was these rocks falling down off, and there was one place where they had, the stagecoach driver, he rushed the horses through, and just behind them was these rocks came down, you see. And they were along the road, I don't know just how far, but Grandma Spetch got off and took the children off the train. She says, I am walking the rest of the way. I'm not taking my children on that again.
Yeah.
He says, well, lady, he says, you'll have a long walk. It's 47 miles. So anyway, she got back on the stagecoach. She wasn't going to have her children on that. But he says, well, lady, it'll be a long walk, 47 miles. But she says, she was scared stiff. She was really scared stiff. And but they were so used to it. That, he says, well, we only kill 1 or 2 a day. He was one of these ones that could just pass it. He says, we only kill 1 or 2 a day. Oh, she was just about frantic. But anyway, they landed at, and then you see, Pa Spetch went down and started to build a place at Owl Creek, and then left Dad to look after they had a couple of horses, and they had, he got these things after they got there, all right.
And they stayed in the hotel though while Pa Spetch went down.
He went down as far as the summit, just at the end, and located there, and then brought them down. And the morning that they brought them down, a wind got up. They had to come down the lake, you know.
Yeah, I know. That's why I wanted.
And it was, and apparently a wind got up, and the Indian that was rowing the rowboat, well, there was 2 rowboats. They had to pull in because it was too windy. He says, well,
over by that orchard on the far side?
By Ellis's.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yes, over there. Anyway, and so
they brought all their stuff on rowboats from Lillooet down Seton Lake, across Seton Portage, and then down Anderson Lake.
Yeah. That's how they come.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then did they go to Indian Meadows after they got down there, or did they go straight down to the summit?
They went right to the summit.
Oh, so when he came down to see them at Indian Meadows, he must have found out about the summit then, did he?
Well, I don't know just how that worked, but I know that he hurriedly put up this. Well, he had corralled some Indians to get these get this log cabin up quickly. But she says they were crowded in there, something terrible at first.
Well, they built that log cabin, and I thought that was there. Somebody else had built it or something. That log cabin was still there when we were there, wasn't it?
Oh yes, it was there. I don't remember. I understood that Pa Spetch left them in the hotel, and he went down, and I think he was away. I think he was away about 10 days before he went back to pick them up. Oh, yeah. I know Mother Spetch said she was frantic for fear that he had drowned in the lake. It didn't get any.
No, there was no communication.
No communication or that. No. But anyway, they and then you see, just a year later, she had to take that. She said, when she got down then, she thought, this is it, I'm not taking that trip again. And a year later, she had to take it to, Bill Spetch was born in Lillooet. You see, she had to go back the same way. Yeah. And so, anyway,
so she went there was there a hospital there then?
No, it was just a woman that took in just maternity.
Like a midwife.
Midwife, kind of a midwife, yeah.
And she wouldn't trust the Indians to help her. They probably would have done a good job.
Well, you see, this Nancy, the Nancy
Yeah.
you saw, why, she had an Indian midwife. She doesn't know. Dad says Nancy doesn't know just what she came through as for her birth. Apparently, at that time, you see, that was 1914. The railway. At that time, the railway was through, but just through when she was born. But the doctor was at Squamish, you see, and he had to come up, and he got there at the end, but the midwife had already done all.
Who's Nancy?
Nancy Painter, you know.
Painter. Oh, yeah.
You know, the one that you drove around.
Yeah, right,
and that. Yeah. And you know, she said, oh, well, you read her letter, that she wants to come out here again to go to that Alaska tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. She wants to come back again.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
They had quite a hard. They stayed a winter in that log cabin up at the summit, didn't they?
No, you see, he went right down to Owl Creek and built the one at Owl Creek, and that's when Dad did so much work. That they did. You see, they did have hay at the summit. I think it was just cut with a scythe, but they had hay, and Dad drove. So you see, yes, he wasn't 10 yet.
No.
You see, he drove a team up there and got hay, and would take hay down from the summit, and
10 years old.
10 years old, but.
Yeah, not quite 10, because it probably was September, and he was 10 in
Well,
October.
they moved down to Owl Creek permanently on the 8th of December.
Was winter.
Yeah, that 8th, and apparently Dad said for sure that it was shake roofs, you see, and Grandma Spetch they had quite a bit of tent canvas stuff around, and she put that over the bedding and everything, and in the morning she'd go to get the children up, and she'd take these off and could shake the snow off the canvas off under. So that's how it was.
The snow would blow in through the cracks in the shakes.
Yeah, well, of course, he said it was so poorly built at that cold time of the year that it wasn't.
I mean, the shakes probably shed the water okay. It was just the snow would blow in through the cracks.
Yeah. So anyway,
because it probably was a 2-story place.
Yes,
that they slept upstairs.
Yes, that was it.
And then they set up a store there, like you did.
Oh yes, he set up a store right away. You see, he brought over a half a ton of stuff from his store in England.
Yeah.
A half a ton of stuff. I mended socks for. See, Waverly wore socks, wool socks at that time up there, and Dad, and I darned their socks with wool that was brought over in 1907 from England.
Yeah.
In 1934.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still used that, and it was good wool. It was good wool.
And so the Indians, there was just probably only Indians in there, wasn't there? There wasn't very many whites.
There was only the odd prospector and those sort of things, white. But
so he sold everything to Indians.
Most everything was sold to Indians.
Yeah.
And he got a good price for everything, because he could just name his own price.
Yeah.
Yes, but then how you wouldn't think the Indians would have had very much money.
No, they didn't have money. They had skins. They hunted and they.
And he took skins. He sold skins to the Hudson Bay or somebody, or.
It wasn't the Hudson Bay.
Probably a fur buyer come through or something.
No, he shipped them to Vancouver. But the first shipment that he shipped to Vancouver came down Lillooet Lake and through Harrison Hot Springs and into Vancouver. The first shipment of furs.
Yeah.
But that was the trade. There was no money exchange. It was in that
So
way.
he would sort of tally up what the value was, and then
Yeah,
of
he
what
did.
they. Oh, for goodness
Yeah.
sakes! Oh, well, when did they start using currency up there?
Well, I
I
think
mean,
I guess when the train.
I think when the train came,
In
well,
19
no, a little ahead of the train coming through, because there was these contractors on the railway and the
Oh, yeah, when
different
they built it, yeah.
inspectors and so
yes.
on coming through to putting through the railway.
And they
That's
would
when
have
that's
money.
when Mother Spetch there was currency then, because that's when Mother Spetch gave meals. You see, she gave meals for those ones. She did pretty good on that, and of course, that's what she told me. This is that she made quite a bit of money out of that, and Grandpa Spetch would just take it all. You see, I mean, he just. So she said, one day I just said to him, she says, I'm working for that. I'm going to have it myself. And so she says, and she says, he was so mad. He was so mad he wouldn't speak to her or anything. But she says, I held my grounds, and she started a bank account at that time. She sent it, there was see, they came in with money, you see, these ones had money on them. And, and she sent this, she says, I sent all small bills and everything out with one of the men. She named him a man that she could trust, you know.
Yeah.
And so sent it out and started a bank account of her own.
And where would that be, to Pemberton? Was there a bank in Pemberton?
No, this
that
was
was right down to Vancouver.
Oh yes, they didn't have anything up there at that time.
No.
Just this, there was Pemberton. Well, Pemberton was only there when the railway went through. You see.
Yeah.
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 Yes. So.
Yeah, but then by that time, how old was Dad then when the construction was going on?
Well, you see, 1914, the railway went through there, and he would be 17, wouldn't he?
Yeah, but that would be afterwards. But didn't he work on the railway? Or didn't he?
He hauled some stuff for the hauled some stuff with their own horses and that.
Yeah.
But you know, he used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and milk the cows. The cows, well, they only had 3 or 4, and feed the horses and get them harnessed and be up at one of the bridges. Yes, he did work on the rail, because he'd haul up to that bridge that was over the, what was that? The
Birkenhead River, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, and he'd be up there for 8 o'clock. You know what I mean? He really worked hard.
With the team of horses all harnessed up and everything. And
Yeah.
And I guess he subcontracted. They must have subcontracted, or Prospect probably subcontracted and hired out.
Well, I'm going to say, I don't know just what arrangement they had, but he was paid for the horses and paid for, but Dad did work.
He must have been only about 14 or 15 then.
Well,
because the railway was through and finished by 1914.
1914, so it was before
then.
that.
So it probably took a couple of years to get it.
Oh, yes. Yes, I know it was going for a while.
Yeah.
So
that was probably about 1913 or no, 1910 or 12, wasn't it? Between 1910 and 12.
I would say it would be about like that, you know.
So he
roughly.
was just a kid, you know.
Oh, he worked hard when he was a kid.
Yeah.
He worked very hard.
And then was this during the time when that you were telling me before we started that the bull when
yes.
Prospect got the bull?
Well, he got the bull in after the railway. After the railway came in, it was after that, because it was shipped in by rail. You know, that's all I know. But it was soon after, because it was shipped in by rail.
Well, what did Prospect do? You said he got it in there and then told Dad he had to look after it.
Yeah. Well, he figured that he had to stay in the store.
There was lineups at the counter, I guess.
Well, that's what, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
He had the responsibility of looking after the bills and what have you, and so on.
And so this is when this bull,
Yeah.
that almost got dead.
Yeah. So, and Dad said he finally said that he wasn't going to go in there anymore. He wouldn't go in.
Do you think Prospect made a lot of money up there or not?
No, he didn't. He wasted it half the time.
He wasted it?
Well, you see, it was a rocky old place. And he'd have Indians working on the digging by hand, by shovel and that, for to put in a hayfield, digging by hand and all this silly sort of way of thing. But I don't know what he spent his money on. But you see, in there they didn't seem to work on much money as far as that goes.
No, but you mentioned
anyway,
he could charge sort of whatever he wanted for his stuff. So
now, when Pa Spetch passed away, Mother Spetch had got $2,000. So you know that he didn't have. Well, you see, the one big expense that he put when they moved to Birkin from Owl Creek up to Birkin again. Why, he put in this lighting plant, this diesel lighting plant.
Diesel, yeah.
Well, it was, I don't think it was any more than about $1,500, like, setting it, they had to wire and so on. But you see, that was a lot in those days.
Oh, yeah.
This was 1929 when they moved up there. And that was a lot of money in those
What year did he die?
34.
34, yeah.
Yeah, 34. But he spent, so really, they all said, oh, Pa Spetch was worth lots, but he wasn't. He just seemed to...
Well, he had quite a bit of property, though, I guess, but the property wasn't worth very much either, I guess.
Well, you see, the Owl Creek place, Mother Spetch had him turn that over to Uncle Bill, so he didn't have anything there.
No.
And this Birkin property, well, you know what that was, how much property there was there.
Yeah. He didn't build those houses there, those old houses.
Yes.
He built the log house?
Oh, not the log house.
No,
not the log house.
He built cabins, I guess.
I thought you meant the cabins.
No, but I mean the store and the old house were there.
Yes.
He must have bought them then.
Oh yeah, he bought them off of these tailors was the name of the that had.
Have you any idea what price he would have paid for that?
I never did know,
no,
and I don't think Dad ever knew.
Oh,
you know what I mean? I don't think Dad ever knew just exactly. But when we sold it, so it shows you how much worth some of the things are up there. We got $7,500.
For the whole property.
For the whole thing.
Stock and everything that was in the store. Cool.
Everything. $7,500.
Did you think that was quite a bit of money at the time?
Well, as far as I was concerned, I was so glad to get it and get out of there that it didn't matter to me.
No. But that was more than what you had to pay for the house down on Fifth Avenue.
Oh, yes. No.
No, it only cost about $5,000, didn't
it? The Fifth Avenue house?
Yeah.
No, it was 6,500. 6,500, and we got 7,500 for the place up there. But you see, there was the moves.
Yeah.
I tell you, you see, we moved down to first move. You see, we moved to Chilliwack.
You went to Chilliwack.
Oh, that was awful.
That was awful.
That was awful. And then we went back up there again, and Dad went working for the forestry, you see.
And where did you live then?
In Charlie Carlson's cabin. This Swede.
And what did you do with all your furniture?
Oh, it was sure piled up everywhere it could be piled. You remember it piled up in Charlie's cabin?
Oh, it was. You took all the furniture back up with you? Well, I guess you would. Yeah.
What were we going to do with it down?
Yeah, because you didn't know where you were going to settle.
No.
What actually happened at Rosedale there? Did
Dad just couldn't take it.
no?
He sort of had a nervous breakdown.
That's where he had the nervous breakdown in the first place. I can remember him out cutting the lawn at Rosedale there, and I saw him. I remember seeing him stand and holding this, and then he came in and lay down, and had left the machine and all just out there, and that was the first indication that he says, "We can't take this." He says, "We can't take this," and so.
Had you bought it already though? Or?
Oh yes, we paid $23,000 for that place.
Oh.
And what did you get for it when you sold it?
I tell you, we were fortunate. We came out with about the same. I mean, we didn't lose.
Oh, yeah, you were lucky then.
We didn't lose heavily on it.
Yeah.
We didn't lose heavily on it. I don't think we made up for exactly what we had to lay out.
No.
But we didn't lose heavily on it. Didn't lose that, we noticed.
And did Dad have much other money besides the sale of the Birkin place? Had he saved much other money?
When we were married, he had $4,000. And he had earned that on the road, working on the road. And when we were married, he had $4,000.
But when you came out of Birkin, though, did you have a fair bit then?
When we came out of Birkin, we had we had the $23,000.
Oh, you had that much.
Well, you see.
You paid cash for the place then, at Chilliwack.
Yes, we paid cash for the place at Chilliwack.
Oh, yeah.
And you see, we got the $7,500 cash at Birkin.
Yeah, so you had about $23,000 in counting what you got, the $7,500 plus.
Well, and then you see what we came out in 1946. That was well, that was 12 years of what we. You see, I gave a lot of meals up there, and we saved everything. You see, at that time. Between that and the 7,500, and then, as I say, add the 4,000.
Oh yeah. Oh well, then. So when you bought the house in Vancouver, you certainly had money in the bank.
Oh yes. Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh well. That's,
yes. Well, no, you see, when we sold the place at Chilliwack, we didn't get the cash out of it. We were about let me see, 12 years before we got the cash out of Chilliwack.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Or then Rosedale, it was nearer, but it was.
And you probably got a pretty low interest rate in those days.
We got 5.5 and 6.
Oh, that was good in those days.
5.5 and 6 we got at that time.
Oh well, that wasn't bad.
Yeah. So we came out. I figured that we didn't lose.
No. Oh well, that's good. Yeah.
That's
So then, then you went back up and stayed in Charlie Carlson's place, and by this time Wade was living down at going to school.
There's I assume a mortgage of about $3,000, about half.
Yeah.
About $3,000. It took me about. I think it took about 5 years to pay that mortgage off, because you just had to, it wasn't. It had to go right through. I tried to get a clause that I could pay more interest, pay more on it to get it down, but it
no,
couldn't.
a lot of
it was worded
like that.
It was worded.
I
had to carry it through.
Yes.
And
And so how long were you there in that house before Dad came down?
I guess it was only a year.
That long?
It was close to a year. Close to a year.
And was he working up at Birkin?
Well, you see, he went on with the forestry.
Yeah.
He was,
Then he was on with Jameson too.
yes.
What's
forgot.
Jameson?
Jameson was the contractor that built the power line up to Bridge River.
Oh, I see.
But you see, he was working on the rail, the speeder for them. You see, he took men up and down and he had to phone into Squamish and that to see where the trains were and that, so he could work this speeder up. And then he was located down at McGuire, wasn't
Oh, yeah. What was that?
McGuire. And I remember going up one weekend to see him up at McGuire. It was.
You could go up on the railroad.
I went up on the railroad.
Yeah.
You still had to go by
But you had to
convenience
go
steamship.
partly by ferry.
Oh yes.
Must have taken you a whole day or something to get there.
Well, it
Yeah.
took a whole day to get from Vancouver to Birken, you see.
Yeah.
It was in those days. It took, well, you'd leave here 8:30, 9 o'clock or something, you know, between 8 and 9 in the morning, and you'd be up there for supper, you know. And
So when you moved there into that place in Vancouver, then did Wave and Merv?
they came right over.
Yes.
They came right over. There were only a few days till they were over with me. You were only a few days picking up and coming over.
Yeah, because they were boarding. Both of them were boarding together somewhere else.
Yeah.
But,
And so then how long was it before you had other boarders besides
Right
Wave and
away.
Merv?
I was in a nip in this way, is that I had to carry on then. You see, I spent everything that I could lay my hands on to get the place. Well, then, you know how there's other expenses, one thing and another. And so I answered ads right away for boarders. And got
Jack Hook?
Jack Hook.
and Don Costin.
Costin. And then it was later I got that one from White Rock. What was his name?
Oh, Hemming.
Henning.
Oh, yeah, that was it. But before that, you had Faye and Eileen.
Faye and Eileen.
Yeah.
I remember Merv saying that this girl couldn't find a place to board, and would I take her in? I says, no. I says, I don't want any girls. I've got boys, and that's enough. Well, he came back and he says, well, she'd like to come and talk to you. I said, well, she can come and talk to me, but I haven't any place for her. And apparently, she had one of these rollaway beds, rollaway cots herself. So she came, well, you know, Faye, she twisted me right around her finger. Well, anyway, so where was she going to put this on? She said, she was so friendly or forward or whatever you like to call it. And she went into the bedroom. She says, it could just sit over there, be under the window there. She says, and I'll make my own bed. She says, she'd make her own bed. It just ended up that I took her, you see.
Yeah.
And really, she wasn't any trouble. She wasn't any trouble. But honestly, the way she twisted me around her finger. And then, of course, you see, then she was a friend of these Gregory's, Eileen's folks. Well, then she got going with Vern, and so Vern would come. You know, honest to goodness, one night, I used to go visit this Mrs. What were the names in Kitsilana there? Jack. You remember they used to come up to Birken.
Oh, he worked for Esso. Imperial Oil.
Imperial Oil or something.
Yeah.
You know, anyway, when Mrs. Craddock or Mrs. Stack or somebody come down, I would go, because I had known them and that, and go over to this Mrs. Boys.
Yeah.
Well, this one night I went over, and of course I never thought anything of coming home at midnight it was streetcars in those days, and that, and you
People
never
do.
thought
I
anything
know.
of it.
No, not the
And
way
that,
it is.
so I came out, and I came into the place, and I smelled smoke. All right, when I came into the house, I smelled smoke, but there was nothing to see of that. So the next morning, Faye said, "Oh," she said, she started calling me Mom, you see. She said, "Oh, Mom," she says, "we had an accident here last night." She says, "And I'll pay for it." I says, "What accident?" And, you know, it was another different Chesterfield I had at that time, wide arm on it and that. And she showed me, and there was a hole burnt, it burned smoke, you see, and there was a hole in there, and they really had to soak that, got water and soaked that, and she did have it mended. She did have it mended for it. She paid for it.
Yeah.
Had it mended for it. But I said,
But Vern didn't pay for it?
well, I don't know whether he
Yeah.
did or, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
it was really, he was so ashamed about the whole thing. I think that I don't think he ever talked about it.
No, I mean, he probably paid her.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But I mean, he didn't talk to me about it. It was Faye talking to me. But I won't deal with this.
Hi. No.
And another night I was out, and they too, he was over, and so, you know, it was, we had, you see, we had just an ordinary stove, you know, woods.
Yes, yeah.
And this was in the early part of the fall, and before you put the furnace on.
Yes, I remember you used to say you never put the furnace on till October, I think.
Oh.
And then it only went till, say, the beginning of April, and that was it.
Yes.
And you never put it on.
No. Well, anyway, they were in the kitchen by the stove, keeping warm, of course. It was cold. But
yes, there are times that it isn't cold at that
but
time
anyway,
of year. Yeah.
You see I made all their lunches, and you know those 8x8 those cake pans, you know, square. Well, one of those would make their lunch, and they could have 2 pieces of cake. I cut it in to make their lunches. Okay, so I made this cake, and it was too warm to put in anywhere. Well, I didn't even have a fridge at that time. I only had a cooler.
Yeah.
But anyway, put it up on top of the dinner plates in the cupboard. So I went the next morning. I went that night. I thought, oh, I'm going to be tired. I may not get around so quick in the morning. I'll make up their lunches tonight, you see. So anyway, I lifted this down, and here was this little note in it, stuck with a toothpick, you know. Hanson Fritz. Written on it. Hanson Fritz. And here was, they had been into this cake. So when they came to breakfast, I says, no cake in your lunch today. No, honest to goodness, here they got into this cake. You see. So that was another thing. So
Gosh, yeah.
anyway.
When, how old was Dad when they had that fire up at Owl Creek? They had a fire in the house at Owl Creek, didn't they, around the chimney?
Yes. I don't know, but I think he was about 17.
Yeah.
I think he was, but apparently that was, he carried you know, they had these old pole ladders, you know, they were just poles and strips nailed onto them, and they were heavy as lead, and he carried that around and put it up on the chimney. He saved they saved their house all right, but and carried a pail of water up, you know, to put down this chimney.
And an axe too.
Yeah.
Because
yes.
I remember him saying that he knew he only had one chance. He got up the ladder with a bucket of water in one hand and the axe in the other, and he had to take one whack with the axe and then dump the bucket, or he wouldn't have been able to stay there. You know, and he did it, and it poured the water down there, and it put the fire out.
Yeah.
Because it was so hot, you mean?
Well, once he opened it up, the flames just shot out, and he dumped the bucket, you know, into the hole, and it put the fire out enough that it didn't
Yes. He had to go down and get more water, but
Yeah.
he had
Right.
stopped it enough
Yeah.
to finish it, you know.
And there was nobody that would have another bucket right ready for
No,
him.
there was nobody there.
Was he there all by himself?
He was the only one there.
Well, I thought Grandpa was
Oh,
there,
I
or
thought
Pop Bitch
so
was there, but he
too.
wouldn't go up on the roof.
Yeah,
Oh,
I thought too.
Well, he may have been there. Yes, he
Yes.
may have been there. But I mean, I know
think he was
did it
kind of
alone.
panicking, wasn't he?
Eh?
I think he was kind of panicking.
I think that was the impression I got when Dad told it, that he didn't know, Pa Spetch didn't know what to do.
You know? Oh, that would be so. That would be so because Dad took on a lot. Dad took on a lot that Pa Spetch should have taken on.
I wonder if Dad took more after his mother, like because Dad was so he was so capable. He really did know how to work.
Yeah.
I mean, he must have got it from somewhere, and it doesn't sound like he got it from his dad.
Well, I often wonder how on earth his dad ever made out half the time because he didn't seem to be capable of anything. I mean, of really, being stable about anything.
How old was Dad when they got that tutor in? What was her name?
Oh, Molly Garvin.
Molly Garvin, yeah.
Well, that
Is that the one that gave you those pictures?
yes. Those pictures and the two dishes on top of the china cabinet, they're just the candy dishes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The
But where did she come from? Like
Ireland.
Oh, she came.
She came from Ireland.
Oh.
It was Irish as a Paddy's pig. She was really, but.
And they hired her to come up there and teach the kids.
Well, of course, yes. They.
Well, how old were they then? Like, how old was Dad then?
Well, you see, she taught Bill for a while, and then they sent him down to Vancouver, and he was about. Well, you see, when he'd be about 5, I think they got her in there.
You mean when Bill was about 5?
When Bill was
because they started the correspondence courses.
Yes.
That was before this Molly.
No, it was just round about the same time, I think, because she worked on this correspondence course with them. I mean, that was.
Oh,
that
she
was,
did.
That
Oh,
was
I
part
see.
It was Pa Spetch, though, was instrumental in getting that correspondence course going, wasn't he?
Oh, yes.
In BC.
And
it was
you
John
spoke
Oliver.
about Oliver, you know.
Yes, it was
Well-
John Oliver. Yes, he was the premier at the time.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And he's in connection with your Weaver family, isn't he?
Yes.
Well,
he married a great aunt.
Yeah.
A great aunt, probably, of mine.
Yeah. Well, that's.
In the farmhouse
Yeah.
that I was,
But anyway, so Dad would, if he was 5, then Dad would have been about 17 then, or 16, 17 then too, eh? So did she teach Dad, or was it just Bill?
Oh no, Dad never had a lesson after he left England, and he was only in the 4th grade over in England when he left, and he never had another day of schooling.
Is that right?
Dad only.
And how about Aunt Nellie? Did she get more?
No.
She didn't either.
No.
Well, and she was a couple of years older than Dad, so she was probably in about grade 6 when they. Yeah.
Well, she didn't have much schooling because she was supposed to be weakling or something, and Pa Spetch would take her out of school so as he could have her on this. You see, he had a horse and cart and went